Today, we're tackling something pretty fundamental, really, our food. We're diving into Michael Pollan's The Omnivore's Dilemma, using the excerpts you sent over the contents page, some key chapters.
Right, the core stuff.
Exactly. And our mission, I guess, is to sort of unravel the complexities behind what sounds like a really simple question. What should we have for dinner?
Yeah, sounds simple, but it's anything but these days, isn't it?
It really is. That question just opens up this huge, tangled web.
It really does. And Pollan is brilliant at showing you the hidden gears, the machinery behind our food system.
So we'll trace the path of corn, mostly.
Yeah, the industrial side. And then contrast that with a completely different approach, the grass-based farming.
And touch on big organic, too, what that label actually means now.
Right. It's all about understanding the forces that shape what ends up on your plate and what that means for us, for the planet.
Okay, let's jump right in. Pollan talks about our national eating disorder in the introduction. That phrase, it really jumped out at me.
It's powerful, yeah.
He mentions how, basic things, even bread, seem to be vanishing from the table, replaced by just confusion, anxiety about food.
Well, and what's so interesting is that it's not about scarcity like in the past. It's almost the opposite. It's the sheer abundance, the overwhelming choice.
Ah, right.
Unlike cultures with really deep food traditions, we're just swimming in contradictory advice, endless new products.
Yeah, fad diets, headlines.
Exactly. And it kind of erodes our basic instincts about what a good meal even is.
Yeah.
So that simple question, what to eat, suddenly feels really loaded.
And Pollan links this directly to one single plant taking over, doesn't he?
He does, which brings us neatly to part one, the reign of industrial corn.
It's kind of staggering when you look at the numbers. The book says over a quarter of items in a typical supermarket have corn in them, or something derived from corn.
It's wild, isn't it? It's practically invisible, but it's everywhere.
He contrasts it with Mexican culture, the whole corn walking idea, where corn is obviously central, tortillas, tamales.
Right. It's visible. It's acknowledged. Our dependence is much sneakier. It's hidden in the ingredients list, high fructose corn syrup, the maltodextrin, the modified starch.
It's the hidden scaffolding of the whole system.
Pretty much.
And it gets even weirder, down to the molecular level. The book talks about carbon isotope analysis, how scientists can tell our bodies are literally built from corn. How does that even work?
Okay, yeah, this is fascinating. So basically, different plants use different methods for photosynthesis, right? And this leaves distinct carbon signatures, isotope ratios, in their tissues.
Okay.
Corn uses a specific pathway, C4, which leaves a very recognizable signature. So when we eat corn, or we eat animals fed on corn, which is most of them in the industrial system.
Right, the cows, the chickens.
That corn signature gets incorporated into our tissues, our hair, our bones, everything. So even if you think you're avoiding corn, the science shows how much of you is, corn-based.
Wow. That really flips the you are what you eat idea on its head in this context.
It certainly makes you think differently about it.
And the history of corn itself is amazing, too. From teosinte, this wild grass, to the plant we have now, it's been totally engineered by us. It can't even reproduce on its own anymore.
That dependence is crucial. We shaped it over thousands of years. And then, early 20th century, we get hybrid corn. Huge yields, right?
Massive yields. But what was the catch?
Well, the book explains that farmers couldn't save their own seeds anymore. The hybrid vigor is only in the first generation.
Ah, so they had to buy new seeds every single year.
Exactly, from the big seed companies. So it created this cycle of dependence. More output, yes, but also less farmer autonomy.
It fundamentally changed farming. Pollan uses the story of George Naylor, the Iowa farmer, to show this.
Right, the human side of it.
And the contrast is so stark. His grandfather's farm was diverse animals, different crops. Naylor's farm, it's basically just corn and soybeans. Monoculture.
Driven by huge economic pressures. It's less about what's good for the land sometimes, and more about navigating government subsidies and market prices that just keep pushing farmers towards more corn, more soy, even if the price per bushel drops.
So you get this relentless drive for higher yield.
Which, as Pollan points out, has serious environmental costs. Soil degradation, fertilizer runoff polluting water.
And speaking of fertilizer, the book really flags the Haber-Bosch process. Why was that such a game changer for corn?
Oh, it was revolutionary. Before Haber-Bosch, nitrogen for fertilizer was a major limiting factor. This process allowed us to synthesize ammonia, nitrogen fertilizer, from the air using, a lot of fossil fuel energy.
And that just blew the lid off corn yields.
Completely. Pollan argues it's a key reason the global population could expand so much in the 20th century. We could suddenly grow vastly more food, especially corn.
It's incredible. A process developed partly for explosives in World War I ends up feeding billions.
But there's the duality, right? It feeds billions, but it relies heavily on fossil fuels and contributes to environmental issues like nitrogen pollution. It's a core tension.
So once that corn is harvested, supercharged by synthetic nitrogen, where does it go next? The grain elevator.
Yeah, and that's where it stops being George Naylor's corn or anyone's specific corn. It just becomes, number 2, yellow dent. A commodity.
Stripped of identity, just measured by weight and grade.
Exactly. And government policies often keep the price low, which encourages finding new uses for all this cheap corn. That's where the big players like Cargill and ADM come in. They dominate the processing and trading.
Right, the processing plants. What happens inside? It sounds like they basically dismantle the kernel.
They really do. The wet milling process is intense. It separates the kernel into starch, germ for oil, fiber, protein, breaks it right down.
And the starch is the key ingredient for
high fructose corn syrup, primarily. That's super cheap, super versatile sweetener that exploded onto the market and is now, well, it's hard to avoid.
But it's not just HFCS, is it? The list of things made from corn derivatives is just mind-boggling.
Oh, it's endless. Modified food starch, corn oil, ethanol for fuel, citric acid, xanthan gum, vitamins, even stuff in drywall, plastics, adhesives. It's woven into the fabric of our industrial world.
The invisible empire of corn, indeed. And this flood of cheap corn calories, this connects to what Pollan calls the Republic of Fat, right?
Yeah, there's a direct line. He makes a historical parallel. In the 19th century, cheap corn meant cheap corn whiskey, leading to more alcoholism.
Okay.
Today, cheap corn means cheap calories, especially from HFCS and refined carbohydrates. And that abundance, combined with clever marketing and processing, fuels the rise in obesity, type 2 diabetes.
The economics just incentivize producing and consuming the cheapest possible calories, which often means processed, corn-heavy foods.
Exactly. It's the path of least resistance for both industry and often for consumers trying to stretch a budget.
And Pollan uses a McDonald's meal to really drive this home, like the ultimate product of this corn chain.
It's a brilliant case study.
The sheer number of corn ingredients he finds is, well, it's almost funny if it weren't so serious. It's not just the soda or the bun.
Nope. It's in the chicken McNuggets, the corn-fed chicken, the batter, the modified cornstarch holding it together, the corn oil it's fried in.
And the salad dressing.
Even the dressing, it just highlights how totally saturated the system is with corn. And then there's the energy cost.
Right. The amount of fossil fuel energy needed to produce that meal is way, way higher than the food energy you actually get from it.
It's incredibly inefficient from an energy perspective, even though it's highly efficient at producing cheap calories. Which raises the big question, is this system, optimized for cheapness and quantity above all else, actually good for us or the planet?
Which leads us perfectly into part 2, a totally different picture. Pastoral grass.
A different food chain altogether. Pollan takes us to Joel Salatin's polyface farm in Virginia.
And Salatin's description of herself is unforgettable. Christian, conservative, libertarian, environmentalist, lunatic farmer.
Yeah, he embraces the contradictions, but his core idea is about working with nature, not against it, mimicking natural systems.
Especially the relationship between grass and grazing animals.
Absolutely central. He argues that well-managed grazing isn't destructive. It actually builds soil, sequesters carbon, makes the pasture healthier. It's symbiotic.
How does he do that? It's not just letting cows wander around, is it?
No, it's very intentional. He calls it management-intensive grazing, moving the animals frequently in tight groups, mimicking how wild herds behave. They eat the grass down, trample manure and organic matter into the soil, then move on, letting the grass regrow vigorously.
So it's optimizing the grass and the animals?
Right. And the energy source. It's the sun, captured by the grass, completely different from the fossil fuel dependence of the corn system.
It sounds idyllic, almost. But Pollan doesn't shy away from the challenges, does he?
Nope, definitely not. This kind of farming is much more complex. It requires deep knowledge, constant observation, and significantly more labor than, say, driving a giant tractor over a cornfield.
And more land, generally.
Often, yes. And scaling it up to feed millions, especially people used to very cheap industrial food, that's the big hurdle. There are trade-offs between this kind of ecological approach and the sheer output of the industrial model.
Efficiency versus something else. Resilience. Health.
Maybe all of those.
Yeah.
It forces you to think about what we value most in our food system.
Which brings us to part 3, trying to navigate the big organic landscape. Pollan uses shopping at Whole Foods as the starting point here.
Right, the temple of organic, you could say.
And he talks about supermarket Pastoral. What's that about?
It's the story that organic food sells, or tries to sell. That picture on the label, the descriptions. It evokes this image of small farms, happy animals, a connection to nature, the sort of pastoral ideal, conveniently packaged.
But the reality can be quite different, can it? He points out some inconsistencies.
Yeah, the industrialization of organic. You have these huge organic dairy operations, thousands of cows that might meet the letter of the organic law, but maybe not the spirit many consumers imagine.
Or the organic salad greens, washed and bagged in California, shipped across the country. Lots of food miles, lots of plastic.
Exactly. Even if they're grown without synthetic pesticides, are they really the sustainable alternative people are looking for? It gets murky.
Pollan introduces people like Jean Kahn from Cascadian Farm, an organic pioneer who eventually sold to General Mills.
Right, and that represents a key tension. Bringing organic into the mainstream, making it accessible, often means partnering with the very corporations that dominate the industrial system.
So does big organic risk becoming just slightly greener industrial food, losing its radical edge?
That's the core debate Pollan explores. Can organic scale up and integrate into the existing system without compromising its original ideals? Or does it inevitably get diluted?
And what about the nutritional claims? Is organic food actually better for you?
Well, Pollan looks at the science. There are some studies suggesting higher levels of certain micronutrients like polyphenols in organic produce. But he also notes that the overall evidence for major health benefits compared to conventional food is still kind of debated. It's not always clear-cut. For many people, choosing organic is about more than just nutrition. It's pesticides, environment, animal welfare.
Right, a whole bundle of values.
Exactly.
So wrapping this all up, this deep dive into the omnivore's dilemma, what's the main takeaway, the central conflict Pollan lays bare?
I think it's the massive, powerful inertia of the industrial food system, built on cheap corn and fossil fuels, versus these alternative paths, the pastoral, the organic ideal that try to operate on different principles, often ecological ones.
And neither system is perfect. There are complexities, trade-offs everywhere you look.
Absolutely. It's not about finding one simple right answer. It's about understanding the consequences of different ways of feeding ourselves.
And it all comes back to that first question, what should we have for dinner? Answering it thoughtfully means knowing the story behind the food.
Yeah, understanding those connections, farm to fork, fuel to body, calorie to carbon.
Becoming aware, really. That seems like the crucial first step Pollan is urging us towards. Making informed choices.
For ourselves and for the wider world.
So, thinking about all this, the corn, the grass, the organic labels, the hidden costs, what's one thing in your own diet, maybe something you regularly eat that you might look at a bit differently now, or want to trace back to its origins after this deep dive? Definitely some food for thought.